All right. Hey there, Shell Point. John High, your Academy Manager, back with you again to talk about another session we have coming up in our Academy. This session is called Church History. It is going to be on Thursday, February 13th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the Grand Cypress Room. Our presenter is Pastor Andrew Hawkins from the Village Church. So, Pastor Hawkins, tell us a little bit more about what you're going to talk about in this church history session.
Well, one of the things that has struck me ever since I've been here is how lots of people here love history.
You're
and
right.
So when you bring historical issues even into a sermon or have a class on them, they tend to be very well received. And it also occurred to me that we really don't do much in the area of church history.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people think the church started with Billy Graham, but of course it goes a long way back before then.
Right? Yeah.
And so they moved from the New Testament into the 21st century, and there's not much known in between. But there's a lot of stuff that's happened.
Yeah.
And I think people will really resonate with understanding some things, to understand a lot about what some of the origins were, not only of the theology that we sort of take for granted these days, but also some of the structure and function of the church. A lot of those things originated all the way back in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries. There's a lot of stuff that took place that would be worthy of our study. Yeah.
That sounds really interesting to me, because I enjoy history, but sometimes I forget about the length of time and how I got to where I'm currently at. So in this case, we talk about early church history. Are we talking about, after when the scriptures were put together, the canon of scripture, or talk to us maybe a little bit more about when we think in terms of early history?
There are a lot of interesting dimensions of that first 500 years. And by the way, I'm thinking of probably about a 6-part series.
Okay.
And this being the first one, so I'll do a different one each semester, and so this is the first one that deals with the first 500 years.
Okay.
And in the first 500 years, I could maybe boil it down to sort of 3 main issues. One of them has to do with creed, because the early church was struggling over issues like the nature of Christ, and there were heresies that were floating around. I once in my prior church taught a class called "In Praise of Heresies." Because what happened was that the church really had to get its act together when some of the more divergent viewpoints began to unfold during those first number of years.
Yeah.
And so you ended up with some of the ecumenical councils, like the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Constantinople, which helped to frame our theological understanding of the nature of Christ as the Scriptures have it, and so deal with some of those heresies. So you have the issue of creed being worked out, particularly as it is involved with the nature of Christ, both his divine nature and human nature. You also have the structure of the church and the growing significance of the bishop. Those who would basically oversee the local church, or then eventually regions of local churches, and how that developed into how the church was structured after a long period of time. And so you have not only creeds being developed during those first 500 years, but you also have the structure of the church working itself out. And some of that had to do with its relationship with the state, because Christianity during that period of time went to a small, persecuted minority that was seeking to be tramped out under the Roman influence to actually being the preferred religion of the Roman Empire, and it gained status. And that's been a blessing and a curse as the church has unfolded over the years in terms of its relationship between the church and the state. So you have the creeds, you have the rise of the bishop and the structure of the church, and then you also have the canon. How did the church come to recognize the authoritative scriptures in the New Testament? They adopted essentially the Jewish canon from the Old Testament, but then how did they come up with those books? And so those kinds of things will be discussed, as well as some of the key figures like Constantine and Augustine will be the focus of a very significant influence during those first 500 years.
Yeah, I remember studying a little bit of this back in college, but I need a fresher course, so I'm going to be there.
That's
so, all right, Shell Point, this is a session you're going to want to be at. Once again, it is on Thursday, February 13th, 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the Grand Cypress Room. church history, in this case, early church history. Sign up at the concierge desk. We'll see you there.